of progress we were able to make on Capitol Hill, and the amount of progress we were able to make in terms of funding research. So, and helping patients. So it didn't take long for the organization to find its footing, but certainly in the last couple of years with Anjee and her team at the helm, it's really started to make a true name for itself, and with some really wonderful, stylish, smart programming, and it's been a great joy of mine to watch it, and I'm very proud to have been a part of it in the early days. And I wanted to say thanks to all of you for being here, and good luck with calling Congress this year. You're going to have a great time, and you're going to do amazing things. Bye.
Carly really was a tremendous leader for the organization, and we wouldn't be here without volunteers, without staff, without committed board members, and I really am so excited to hear Judi share a little bit about how we got started. I know she kind of alluded to some things yesterday, but I think she has more to say today.
Is this on? Okay, hi. Yeah, I tried to keep it really short yesterday because then I thought, what am I going to say today? I've been thinking a lot about my dad because that is really where I got started, and I thought it'd be fun to kind of share how, because even before C3 started officially in 2005, where I think most folks came in, it was actually about 6 years of work before this organization even started. Anyone here or started on the ACOR colon listserv? I think Anjee referred to it. Yeah. So do you remember my dad at all going far? Patty does. So my father, I'm an only child, and so to go even further back, just to kind of share a little bit of personal history, my dad was born about 30 years too early because he should have been a millennial for how he thinks of how he thought about gadgets and technology. But back then, it was Radio Shack and VCRs the size of this platform. So that's what he was into, and that's how I got my love of technology, because on the weekend, my mom worked a lot of hours, and Dad used to take me to go, we'd pack a lunch and go visit Radio Shack and just see what was new, and so he got me really into that technology. He was diagnosed with colorectal cancer in May of 1998, and by that point, I was already married. I was 7 months pregnant with my second child, living my own life, getting that phone call on a Friday night that my parents had just gotten back from seeing the doctor. He was having kidney stone symptoms, and he went to the urologist, who was a friend of his, who did an ultrasound, and called him in and said, your kidneys look fine, but the ultrasound picked up the liver, and said, okay, something's going on. Then they did colonoscopy, and they did scans and found that the primary tumor was in the colon. It was, at that point, the liver was very involved. It was stage 4. So that was May of 1998, and my dad, being my dad, the first thing he did was hit the internet, found the ACOR colon listserv. At that time, there was breast cancer, pink was starting to pop up, and there was a lot of frustration in that listserv that there was nothing. Nobody was talking about colon cancer, and to be honest, when my dad was diagnosed, all I knew about colon cancer was I think Ronald Reagan had something going on with that, but it just wasn't in the news, and nobody was talking about it. So he got very involved with the ACOR, and that was the beginning of what is now the Colon Cancer Alliance, was that group on that listserv, and Nancy and everyone. I stayed off it because I wanted that to be his personal place. I wanted that to be the place where if he wanted to totally kvetch about his family, he didn't need to know that I was involved as well, but it got him out of bed in the morning when he was on chemo and feeling bad. He was energized by what this group was going to start, and he was going to go to Washington, D.C., and he was going to make a difference, and he was going to be like one of their first spokespeople. It got him through. Fortunately, at that time, there wasn't any of the chemo treatments. I think Oxy was just coming out of clinical trial. So it was palliative, and he declined very quickly, and he passed away in February of 1999. And at that time, he gave my mom all the Social Security and the insurance papers and all that. He gave me all the passwords. He showed me where all the computer stuff was, the technology. So I was sitting Shiva, and at that time, my daughter, by that point, my baby was 6 months old and on my lap. And I logged on, and I was able to read the messages coming in, and as the ACOR listserv found out that he had passed, the reaction. And it so touched me that he had this world and this connection, and talking about CCA and talking about, I think it had a name by then, but that's about it. And at that point, I was a professional graphic designer doing logos and production. And someone said, wow, we really have to find someone who could do a website and logo. And I'm reading this, logged in under my father's email, and I'm like, I can help, you know. And that's led to, for about 2.5 years, I volunteered about 35 to 50 hours a week, getting CCA off the ground. And that's when I met Nancy and all the Nancy and some other amazing volunteers who really got me through. I don't know how I would have made it through those first couple of years with a baby, and my oldest was just diagnosed with autism at the same time. So CCA got up, and Nancy and I and a bunch of other folks really started realizing that as amazing as the CCA was becoming, there was a gap. There was something missing. It was really wanted to focus more on the research and advocacy piece. And I don't know if Nancy shared a story that she was getting more involved, and she was really pushing on the research and advocacy, and she had a meeting on Capitol Hill. And apparently the person she was meeting with, their computer was arranged in such a way where she was able to see someone say, have the meeting with her, but don't promise her anything. And if you know Nancy, like that was just, the red flag of a bull, and she reached out to me. She said, I can't do this myself. I can't just I need a group. I need the organization. I need the movement. And together, these motivated people, we're going to be able to make a difference where one or two acting on their own can't. So at that point, we're still keeping in touch. I was doing other nonprofit work at that point, and she sent me a text message one night. We were talking, I think, on IM Messenger, and she said, I want to start another group. Okay, Nancy, can you help me? All right. I already got money. She had already made phone calls, and she had secured a little seed money. And, so I helped out as a consultant to try to just get C3 off the ground. And a few months later, she said, we need someone to do this full time. And, are you interested in giving up the graphic design freelance work that I was doing at the time and do it full time? And essentially do little things like set up an office, get nonprofit status. That was the first thing I did, is apply for the 501c3. I still think I have the tax number memorized. And just all those back-end things behind the office, behind the scenes, in order to allow people like Nancy and Pam and Carly to be out in front and do what they are doing, because I did all the business and technology as it was coming up. So and then Carly came along about a year later, and I think she kind of explained what it was like and building up, and then I think we'll probably talk a little later about the rebranding, which was the big changing over the name and everything that's been going on. But that's my story. And now I work for Salesforce, which is technology that I implemented at Fight Colorectal Cancer and got really excited about, because how it empowered small nonprofit organizations to look a lot bigger and be more effective than they are. And I ended up getting hired by the company, and now I work with lots of nonprofits doing some of the startup work that I did for this organization.
So I'm going to introduce Pam. But before I do, I want to share a little bit of story about Judi, too. So I was at the University of South Carolina probably like 12 years ago now, and I knew nothing about colorectal cancer. When I took that job, I thought people were going to be there. It was a Center for Colon Cancer Research, so I started looking for people, and it ended up being mice. So it was a basic science research group, and there were no people. So I Googled colorectal cancer and found, at that time, C3. And I was like, okay, well, this is a great start. Looks like there are people there. And they were doing advocacy on the Hill. And because I was federally funded, I couldn't pay my way to come to Call on Congress. And Judi gave me my first scholarship to Call on Congress. And I remember distinctly I met Pam, and I met others who are still here and fighting and doing great work. And I just remember meeting that group and saying, you know, survivors are where it's at. And as a young public health professional, I was like, we need to do more for survivors. And I remember Wanda Addy, I came back, I said, Wanda, we got to do something in South Carolina that really honors survivors and their families and get the word out about prevention. But it really took the scholarship that Judi gave me. And I'm so honored to be here now. But so this is your first trip. If this is your first trip, you don't know where this is going to end up, but you're going to do great things. And so I really think these stories of looking back and what you can impact and what your story and who you touch are so important. And Pam has been such a great mentor to so many survivors. And she's been at every single Call on Congress and come back every year. So really excited for her to share.
Including the first launch of C3 in March of 2005. It was an OVAC. So we launched C3 soft, because we didn't even have our nonprofit status when we officially launched. We had a name and a logo. And so a bunch of folks came in, and that was actually 6 years starting 2 organizations with Nancy. It was the launch of C3 when we actually met in person for the very first time. So.
How I got started with this, I was doing CCA. I was going to their conferences because I was looking for new treatments. I was going through treatment at that time. I was struggling with my treatment. In that last conference I went to, 2 great things happened at the conference. First, I found a new treatment. And second, I met Nancy Roach. I was really frustrated because I had rectal cancer. And everyone, only thing they all talked about, colon cancer. And Nancy walked up to me and said, do you want to be an advocate for colorectal cancer? I said, you said rectal. And she said, yeah, colorectal. And I said, whatever you want me to do, I'll do it, just because you said rectal. No, that's how I got started. I keep coming back, first of all, for myself. It's something, I was a teacher prior to my diagnosis, and I always felt like I helped people. I helped children learn. I helped their parents sometimes be better parents. And after my diagnosis, I decided not to go back to teaching, and I wanted to help others. I didn't know what capacity that was. I was searching for that. And I started coming to Call on Congress. I met people, I talked with them, I encouraged them to carry on. I encouraged them to use their voice on the Hill. Your voice does carry a lot of weight on the Hill. My first year I went, I had no clue what it even meant to really be an advocate on the Hill. And we didn't have a lot of training back then. And so when I went, I had a senator named Senator Byrd, and he was head of the Appropriation Committee. I had no clue what that meant. So when I went to talk with him, he said, after I gave my spiel, he said, no, I can't vote for you. I was furious. I didn't know that he wasn't allowed to do the vote. He just broke the vote. Isn't that right? Am I right on that? He said he couldn't vote because he was head of the appropriation. Well, okay, he told me. So anyway, he said, I can't vote. And if any of you know Senator Byrd, or ever heard of Senator Byrd, he was tough. And he probably would have got voted in our state whether he didn't show up for nothing or whatever. Everybody loved him. And I just said to him when he said that, I said, well, fine, I'm going back to West Virginia and tell everybody not to vote for you because you don't like colorectal cancer patients. And I left. I came back and I told Nancy, and Nancy said, Pam, they don't always tell you right then they're going to do what you ask them to do. But before I left Call on Congress that year, his staffer called and said, he supports you 100%. So your voice matters. And that just touched me. And I keep coming back for that reason. I keep coming back for all of you. I've met some of the greatest people in my life since I've been coming to this. And it's like we're now family.
Okay, so Angie's asking what my fondest memory is. I have so many. I think the key thing is I feel like a little bit like the person who's talking about kind of what it was like to get around before there were cars. So for me, it's like, wow, you look at Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and what that takes, how it helps take a message and amplify it, but it's also dangerous because it allows you to get a lot of numbers, but not a lot of really action. Yes, we've got 5 million people who are able now to click a button, but I think the difference of that what Pam was talking about, that one-on-one building relationships, and that part doesn't need social media. That is entirely about making connections. And I think one of my fondest memories was, in particular, there's some amazing people I worked with back in the beginning. So, like Kate Murphy. Who knew Kate Murphy? Oh my gosh. So me and her from CCA, one of the first things Nancy and I did, she wasn't on staff, but she might as well have been, is she had a way of communicating, taking like really scary, complex medical language, certainly I didn't understand anything I was looking at, and saying, oh, that makes sense. And so my fondest memory first was getting her on board, like convincing her of the vision and having her write for our website and getting to know her. Rescheduling Call on Congress around March Madness basketball season, because if there was a game going on, I don't care, she would not sit in front of the room, and I scheduling around that. Advocate named Janet Turcotte early on, whose dream it was to get the colorectal cancer Blue Star and Hope at the Preakness on the blankets, and working with her and getting her on CNN. And so she did an interview for that. Another amazing advocate, Rob Michelson, who worked for American Express, and he really wanted to ring the bell of the New York Stock Exchange. That was something that was important to him, and that was before, like, NASDAQ makes a big production of having nonprofits in. It wasn't as easy, and seeing the look on Rob's face, I think it was a few months before he passed away, standing on that platform, able to ring the bell. So that getting to know someone personally and seeing them become advocates and getting that strength through probably one of the hardest times, and just getting the 501c3. Like anybody who's ever had to start a nonprofit and do that application, getting that IRS letter in the mail, probably for me like a very geeky, exciting thing.
Gosh, the fondest memory. I think it's just seeing people come back year after year, have the same passion that I have to go back on the Hill and to make a difference. It's just, they do, after you keep going back, you do build those relationships. I guess, so that's my fondest memory, just seeing every face that's here come back and come back and come back.
Do you have any other things you want to share with the group before I open it up for questions?
I think, it's really, one of the most interesting, challenging times was we started it as C3 with the URL c-three.org. And the learning lesson, I had never started a nonprofit and no experience with marketing. So realizing then that, you say, hey, I'm from C3, you have to spend 20 minutes explaining exactly what it is and what it stands for. So we realized, Colorectal Cancer Coalition it's a good name, it's a respectable name, but we ended up registering a whole bunch of URLs. Prevent colon cancer, prevent colorectal, we just did that right up front, got all these URLs. And one of the URLs we got was fightcolorectalcancer.com and .org. And going through the list and realizing, that actually works better. So we started using the fightcolorectalcancer.org URL while we were still Colorectal Cancer Coalition. And realizing in 2009, 2010 that a rebrand was needed, and convincing the board of that, and convincing the board to go to fight colorectal cancer, and some of the pushback that we got of, it's not a fight, it's not a battle. I lost my dad. I was pissed. I wanted to fight. I had no problem with that. And the tagline of Get Behind a Cure, there was some nervousness of going a little bit more aggressive, and but now I see Anjee and Michael and what you're, this group and how young and energetic it is, and I don't know if Colorectal Cancer Coalition C-3 could have accomplished that. So, I left very shortly after the rebrand was launched, and now coming back and seeing what this group is doing and being strong and fighting, and just really glad that we made that decision to change. So
that's great. Well, I'm really glad that you did that. Thank you. So does anybody have any questions? I'm going to open it up to kind of the audience. Oh, we have a live stream question. I was like, am I on live stream? Oh, wait. Hello, live stream.
hi, Nancy.
So we have a question from Josh Wimberly. He's an advocate from Alabama. He actually serves our GAC.
Hi, Josh.
Josh says hi to everyone. He says, Judy, how do you see the ever-changing landscape of technology impacting nonprofits engaged in advocacy? More specifically, how does an organization like Fight CRC sift through newer technological platforms and focus on those that will bring the most opportunity for impact on legislative issues?
I'm just glad that wasn't my question.
Thank you, Josh.
Yeah, no, that is a really awesome question. It's probably a good one for Michael as well, because I think that's probably what keeps him up at night now. But yeah, I think it goes back to what I said before. When we first started doing online advocacy, it was all about the platforms that allowed you to mass communicate, send this action alert message to your representative. And that was a big deal back then, because, sending 400 emails got attention. And it reminds me, James Coleman was sitting on his panel here yesterday, and she actually, in addition to helping out when Carly was on maternity leave, she also facilitated our early strategic planning based on her experience being one of the leaders in the breast cancer movement. So we kind of brought her in to help us strategize how to replicate, not necessarily copy, but kind of learn from the lessons of the early breast cancer movement to bring it to colorectal cancer. And she shared a story about how they had this action and they ended up getting the vote they wanted by fax spamming an office, shut it down, and similar to another story, it was yes until the legislator called and said, okay, we got it, make it stop. And so in the beginning, email was that way, but then very soon offices started doing ways. They now congressional offices don't care how many, sorry if you guys are still doing it, but they don't care how many people send that replicated message through an organization. They kind of can count, okay, we got 50,000 messages, but it's not slowing them down. It's not really grabbing their attention the way it used to. what grabs their attention is those personal relationships. It's my mom at the very first call on Congress noticing that Chuck Schumer was walking down the hall and chasing him down and getting a ride with me in the elevator and having a conversation, then finding out afterwards that he signed on. It is entirely about building those relationships. So technology is just a way to facilitate that. Technology is a way to scale that. Technology does not replace that one-on-one relationship. So that's what I would say, that passive, just click a button and don't put any passion behind it. There are thousands of that. Yeah, do it. That's fine. Someone's counting the numbers of how many buttons. Your push is going to make the difference between 1 million and 1,000,001. Awesome. But any opportunity you have to form a relationship, to form a connection, to get to know someone personally, if technology helps that, awesome. And I think tools are starting to be more targeted, to be more selective, and it's a great thing.
Do we have any other questions? Does anybody have any questions in the room?
Where do you see colorectal cancer going in 5 years? Where are we going to be in 5 years?
Stronger than ever.
We have a question for you guys.
Well, I guess I will take that question. So Dana and David Wicks, if you're in the room, I'll tell you where we're going to be in 5 minutes if the board is in the room. No, but very honestly, I think, the last 3-4 years, it's been tremendous. I mean, we've seen more advocates. I mean, if you look around the room today, you're looking at about a 30 to 40% growth over the last 2 years. I know the Housemans, when I first came on board, they said, we're about 60 to 75, let's just get to 100. And the first year that I was on staff and we were trying to get to that 100 number, we were just shy, I think, of like 1 or 2 people, and I was like, oh gosh, we gotta break that 100. Now we're way over 100 people. We've got junior advocates. So it's hard to say where we're going, but I'll tell you, we're starting to really hone in on this idea of advocacy and research, and that interplay between having a voice and having a joint effort to support research. And I think as we start seeing these breakthroughs, as we start understanding what we can do to help patients who are in the fight against colorectal cancer and really preventing colorectal cancer, I think that having a mobilized group that's committed and focused is going to be exponentially more important. And as we start talking about this, and we're going to talk about this all day, but as you start looking and going up on the Hill and hearing what the members of Congress and what Vice President Biden is doing with the Moonshot program, it's very timely. And we won't make a difference until we get up there and say, what you're doing matters, we support you. We give you that political cover to say, stand up for cancer patients, and colorectal cancer needs to be at the top of your list because it's preventable. There are over 23 million people in this country who are age eligible that need to be screened, and there are over 1 million colorectal cancer survivors with kids and families that want a cure. And that's really our story, and I hope that in 5 years we're still talking about it, but that we have actual solutions and impact in 5 years. So thank you for my soapbox moment. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Okay.
So I'm probably one of the dinosaurs. Can you guys remind me?
Here.
I'm probably one of the
Candace, wait.
dinosaurs.
For the live stream folks.
Okay, so I'm probably one of the dinosaurs that has been around since maybe 2004. I was diagnosed in 2003, and there were virtually not a lot of organizations. As a matter of fact, CCA was the one that came up for me, and I started volunteering for them. And I was doing volunteer work for them when we had to create our own brochures just to do things. And then I found the ACORD list that helped me get through a lot, and your dad was on the list, Kathleen Murphy, and a few other people. So with that being said, having watched CRC, Fight CRC, come a long way from the time when I started to now, this is fantastic. And it keeps me energized, although I'm doing very well now, it keeps me energized to get back into the fight. And every time I come, I see a larger group, and I see more and more people energized to do. You have created a movement. It's not just advocacy, it's a movement. And I'm so proud to be a part of it. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of it, and thank you for everything that you're doing.
Thank you.
And as she said, being a patient and watching this organization grow from that first time, there were 11 of us in that room, to now, it's amazing.
And I just have to share one really funny story for, besides being us at that kind of first or second of 2007, just when the people come in later who have scheduled your meetings for you and it all kind of works and your timing is good, just go up to him, I think his name is Christopher, and just say thank you, because you have no idea. The first year, we worked with, there's a lot of consulting firms here in the DC area that do meeting scheduling. We thought, how hard could that be? We'll just do it. So we had about 20 or so people that came down, and that was 1 year, we just thought, we'll do our, we'll work scheduling, how hard that'd be. People came down here a week before, found out half the meetings weren't actually scheduled. So that was the oh no moment. I'm not going to use the real words that we use on a live stream, but it was a learning experience. So what we ended up having to do was essentially ask the advocates at the training before to make their own phone calls and call it, get their own meetings that day. And it was the nightmare that every single person ended up having a meeting, the sharing afterwards of that passion of when it's scheduled versus when you're saying, here's when I show up, versus I called, I'm in town, this is important to me. Yeah, and few even got members to make the scheduling. So to go from there to scheduling meetings from 120 some odd people, I mean, that just would have given me a heart attack. So it's just amazing to see it scale. And next year, 200 people, 300 people. And when you go for the new ones, when you're, definitely don't be afraid to wear the fight colorectal cancer gear. I see a lot of times pictures, people are wearing jackets over where it's, you're going to be there. There's going to be 100 different groups with their signs and balloons and banners. Anything you can do so that from a distance when you're in a group, we had cover your butt when people stopped us and asked us, what? Folks saying, what's that for? And the option, it was fun coming up with that. You have to see what we rejected. So yeah, they talked yesterday about being able to have those conversations. But yeah, just anything you can do to wear it with pride, make sure people know exactly why you're there, but this seems such a shy group, and you don't want to talk about it, but yeah.
Anybody else have any questions? If not, Well, I really want to thank you both. I mean, you have been pioneers. I know Nancy's not here and you're watching, but I mean, you guys have done an amazing job starting this organization. We want to thank you, and thank you for being committed.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I know as someone who's only been involved with the organization for 3 years, it's so much fun to hear about not only the funny stories, but the seriousness of what you guys have accomplished and how much blood, sweat, and tears you really poured into that. And I know on our speaker prep calls for this panel, it was Judi and Nancy, and I just got to listen to them just share with each other about different memories that they have and how they started with a group of, 6, Pam? Or 11? And that's just incredible to me, looking at this room full of people, that you guys have just come such a long way in your journey. So thank you for being here. Our next speaker is Chelsey Hickman. She brings a unique combination of experience. She's with Winning Strategies Washington. She's got more than 10 years of experience on the Hill in both the House and the Senate. And we're so excited to have you. So she's going to speak to you guys about how your voice matters as an advocate. So welcome, Chelsey.
Thank you so much for that warm welcome. When I worked on Capitol Hill, my mom had a specific way of describing what I did. She would say, you know, the senators are on C-SPAN, and then there's a staffer that whispers stuff in their ear. That's what Chelsey does. And she was very proud of that description, and I did do that, but there were other things too. When I left and became a lobbyist, she kind of wasn't sure what to do with that. I don't know if it was too much talk radio, I don't know what it was, but she wasn't sure if she was willing to commit. But really what lobbying is advocacy. You're all here to lobby, you're all here to be advocates, so I feel like I'm actually in pretty good shape. I'm going to tell my mother that I have lots of good friends and that I'm among good people, so I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. It's really wonderful to look out over the audience and see so many people committed to doing this. I know it's a personal sacrifice, not just your time, but you had to leave your job and your family and your other responsibilities, and take the time to tell your story. And I want you to know that it's worth it. It is worth it. And just like Pam and Judi were saying, you make an impact. And I want to talk a little bit about how you can do that. Just like everybody here, I have a personal connection to colorectal cancer. My cousin Cassidy, who was born on my 3rd birthday, was diagnosed a couple years ago, and like many patients, never really had any symptoms. She had just had her 2nd baby. She was about 6 months old, and she was experiencing a little bleeding, and she didn't know what was going on. It scared her, and so she went to the emergency room, and the doctor didn't really know what was going on and said, you know, you might want to go to a gastroenterologist, but you know, it's probably fine. She wanted to know what was going on, so she made the appointment, and after fighting with her insurance company literally until she walked into the appointment to get her colonoscopy, she got it. The doctor came out ashen-faced and said, you have cancer, stage 3B, and we need to start treatment immediately. Cassie was 32 years old. She had a 4-year-old and a 6-month-old, and that was not the diagnosis she was expecting to hear, and like many here, didn't know anything about it until that moment. I'm happy to report that after 13 rounds of chemo, Cassidy is in remission and is doing very well. Now, certainly that story has elements that all of you recognize, whether it's in your personal life or people you care about, people you love, and hopefully hearing that story from me makes me a little bit more relatable and maybe makes you think I might have something that's worth listening. I don't have the long and storied history that these ladies do, but that's exactly how advocacy works. It's an opportunity for you to tell a story that puts a face on an issue for a member of Congress. In my work, I've seen firsthand how impactful advocacy can be. And I want to share a story with you. I work on behalf of advocates for treatments for Duchenne muscular dystrophy. And if you're not familiar, Duchenne is a universally fatal degenerative disease, muscle wasting disease. Primarily affects boys, and usually by their early 20s, it takes their lives. There's no treatment, there's no FDA-approved treatment or cure. And so it's a very humbling experience to work with this group. A young boy named Gabe from Alabama decided he wanted to be an advocate and wanted to come to Washington and talk about what needed to be done. He wanted to come and urge the FDA to use the tools that it had and urge Congress to give the FDA more tools. So he told his story to his Congressman Spencer Baucus of Alabama. And clearly, I mean, he was probably 7 years old at the time, so he wasn't a congressional expert. He didn't understand the finer points of the congressional budget or the FDA approval process or anything like that. But he did know that if he didn't get a treatment, he'd lose the ability to walk, to feed himself, to care for himself, and eventually he'd lose his life to this disease. Before Gabe's first visit, Congressman Baucus had no exposure to Duchenne. He didn't know anything about it. He'd never heard of it. He had never been involved. He got quickly attached to this little red-headed boy, and he recognized the opportunity that he had to make a difference for this boy where he couldn't do it himself. And he also recognized the opportunity he had to educate his colleagues to do the same thing. And that's exactly what he did. Congressman Baucus has since retired from Congress, but he became a very passionate advocate for the Duchenne community. He hosted briefings for staff to learn more about the disease and the issues that they were having at the FDA. He co-sponsored legislation to give the FDA more tools to approve drugs faster, and those legislative provisions have since become law. He supported legislation for more funding for research, all of those things. But without Gabe's advocacy, then Congressman Baucus may have never become involved. He may have never known anything beyond just a passing awareness. Now, not every meeting you have is going to result in a Congressman Baucus, someone who is a champion. It's great when it happens, but the good news is it's not necessary. Over the next, while you're here in town, you're going to sow a lot of seeds. You're going to raise awareness. You're going to heighten the sensitivity of the staff and the members of Congress so that when they hear about opportunities to help you and they hear about initiatives that might matter to you, they're going to take a second look at it where maybe they wouldn't have before. So I want to talk a little bit about what, in my experience, are elements of successful advocacy. So I worked for a senator and a member of Congress who both took their constituents' concerns very seriously. And I think most representatives are that way. They value their constituents' input, and they genuinely want to make a difference. So I'm sure that some of you are worried, especially you first-timers, that because you're not a congressional process expert, you don't know enough about the budget, you can't talk about how a bill becomes a law, that you won't be effective. But I can tell you that that's not true. What you are is an expert on how colorectal cancer has impacted you and your family. And that's the story that you're here to tell. It's not trying to debate the finer points of the law. It's really to put a face on this issue. And I think there's a common misconception that senators and members of Congress have pet issues, quote unquote pet issues, and that's all that they care about. And certainly if they have a personal connection to something, they might work on that issue a little bit more. But I think the vast majority, in my experience, of senators and representatives and their staffs they're good, reasonable human beings. They want to make a difference. And if they don't care about the issue you care about, a lot of times it's because they don't know about it yet. So you're here to teach them. Take that opportunity and teach. You don't have to have a canned speech, but make your story memorable. Make sure that you hit the high points and don't overwhelm with details. I laughed when she said, all I talk about is colorectal cancer. My husband and I have a joke. I have a son with autism, and every time we go out with friends, we have to say, okay, first ask them how they're doing and ask them questions about their life, because it really can consume you, and that's all you talk about. So keep it precise, keep it to some interesting, memorable points, and it will serve you well. The second element I want to talk about is having a clear ask. So staff and members on Capitol Hill are really busy. They'll probably have 5 meetings before yours and 10 after. I mean, they're in back-to-back meetings all day, every day. And if you respect their time, you're more likely to get a good reception and a willingness to help. So the formula that I think works, in my experience, is describe the problem, explain your experience with the problem, and then give them a solution to the problem. That's really that you're here to do. And the great news is you have materials that the staff here at Fight Colorectal Cancer has put together, and use those tools. DC is probably the one place in the world where ask is used as a noun, probably more than it's used as a verb. It's a very DC thing to say. Normal people don't really talk like that, but every good advocate or lobbyist knows that the ask is everything. What is your ask? It's the concrete actions that you're asking the member of Congress to take. Otherwise, you're just here on a trip. If you don't get to the point where you ask them to take action on your behalf, then it's not going to be nearly as impactful. So for this week, your asks are clearly defined. Make sure that you get to those asks when you talk to the members of Congress. Telling your story is a means of gaining their support, so make sure that you walk out of there having made that request. The third element I want to talk about a little bit is social media, and it was discussed a little bit earlier, but I've watched advocacy evolve pretty significantly since I got to Washington in 2002. Back then, members of Congress were still replying to email with written signed letters. They would mail them out. And social media didn't really exist, at least not the way that it does now. But your ability to stay in touch with Congress and to connect Congress with your community and amplify your message is just it's just a complete game changer, and it's really part of any successful advocacy effort. I agree that it doesn't take the place of a personal relationship, but it is a very useful tool, so you should use it. Members of Congress love social media, some more than others, but it's definitely, they recognize that it's such a wonderful connection to their constituents to show what they're doing, to show what they care about. So take a photo with the member of Congress and post it on social media. Here I am at Call on Congress, thank you for your support. If you don't get a photo with the member, that's perfectly fine. Tag them in your photo, tag them on Twitter and say, thanks for taking the time, great staff. And that, again, kind of creates this virtual paper trail that you can build on. And that brings me to the fourth and final element I really wanted to address today, and that's, don't let this week be the last time that you have contact with the staff that you meet. They talked a little bit about building relationships, and I think that it happens more often than you might think that advocates come to Washington, they have a wonderful meeting, it's a very positive experience, and then they never do any follow-up, they never contact that staff again. And you'll be asking members and staff to take action. Follow up with them. And as was said, they don't often in the room say, oh yes, absolutely. Usually it's, thank you for the information, let me review it. Don't let them off the hook by never getting back to them. Follow back up with them, thank them for their time, and make sure that they understand how important this is to you. Keep them informed of developments that are important. Invite a member of Congress to come to some kind of event in the district, really engage that staff. Your goal is to become the face that member and staff think of when they come to make decisions about colorectal cancer, whether it's funding or legislation, but that's your goal. You want to be that person. So if you really feel like you hit it off with the staffer, really work to develop a relationship with him or her. And you won't be sorry. Absence makes the heart grow fonder does not apply here. You have to build that relationship. You have to work at it. In conclusion, let me just say again how important it is that you came to Washington. I can't emphasize enough how important it is for you to tell this piece of the story. Congress has experts on data, and they have experts on the law, and they have experts on all kinds of things. You are the experts on your experience. And that's the piece that they can't have themselves. So what you're doing is important, and it's absolutely worth your time. Thanks again for letting me join you, and I can't wait to tell my mom I can be a lobbyist and a good person. So thank you very much. I tried it too.
Does anyone have any questions for us, for Chelsey? Yes. And if you're on live stream, I am looking for questions, so feel free to submit them.
Chelsey, another nonprofit that I volunteered with has said that when we have events, especially fundraising events, that we cannot invite an elected official because it would violate the IRS laws on the C3. So you're saying invite, where's that fine line?
There are rules that govern the way that members of Congress can be involved. They cannot raise money for you. They can't put their name on something and say, come and give money to this. It's against the rules. I may be mistaken. They can attend, but they can't be on your materials and that sort of thing, if that makes sense. So they can come, they can meet your members, they can interact with everybody, but they can't be the draw, if that makes sense.
Okay, because that's what I had said, and I was told, no, you're wrong. This will violate IRS laws.
Some members won't do it because they don't want to deal with it, frankly. I mean, some members just want to stay a mile away, but the good ones will go through the process, make sure that they get the appropriate, clearance, and then they'll attend. Both members that I worked for attended, things like that all the time. But again, they just can't be seen as using the federal government to raise money for a nonprofit.
Okay,
That's a good question.
Any other questions? I'd love to ask you a question. So we talk a lot at Call on Congress about getting involved once you go home. And we do have programs like the August Recess Challenge that will give you guys an opportunity to really roll up your sleeves and do things in the district during August. But outside of that, What would you encourage advocates to do once they return home other than the follow-up?
Yeah, all members of Congress have state and district staff. And so if you haven't met those people, it's a great opportunity to do that. They're based in the state, they're there 100% of the time, and a lot of what they do is more casework, helping with federal agencies, that sort of thing. But that really makes a connection for that member that, okay, they know my district staff, they've been there. Invite that district staff to events that you're doing too, whether it's a health fair or it's some kind of fundraiser, something like that. That district staff is the eyes and ears of the member on the ground, and it's really valuable to have a relationship with them as well.
So, Chelsey, could you speak to a little bit about your relationship? I know earlier you had said you were the whisperer behind the member, but for those of our folks that will be meeting with staffers, could you explain that relationship a little bit more and the importance of that role?
Yeah, absolutely. So typically the way a congressional office is set up, you have a bunch of policy experts in different areas of policy. So a lot of the people you all will meet with will be the health policy person. And the member of Congress depends on that person to do the due diligence, understand what a bill does, understand kind of the ramifications, and make recommendations. That doesn't mean that the member of Congress doesn't do the reading and that sort of thing too, but that's what the staff is there for. And so a good staffer who makes a recommendation to their boss, typically if their boss didn't get a chance to meet with you, they view their staff as their proxy. And so if their staff says, yes, this is a good idea, then typically the member will say it's a good idea. So making a good impression on that staff is really important. And the reverse is also true, unfortunately, so keep that in mind. But there's definitely Washington is run by 25-year-old staffers, and for better or ill, know that going in and make sure that you make a case that's compelling no matter who it is that you meet with, because they make decisions based on their staff because they can't be everywhere all the time. Does that answer your question? Okay, great.
What do you do if you're in the middle of doing your ask and you feel like you're losing their attention? You feel like they're almost like you're in the middle and you feel like you're failing somehow? Do you
jumping jacks?
Yeah.
Or no.
Like, how do you recover from that?
Yeah, and it goes back to, they literally are doing this all day, every day. And so that's where it's so critical to be concise, to be memorable, and not to lose yourself and overwhelm them with the details. If you feel like they're drifting away, usually the best thing to do is refer them back to the material that you brought, make sure they have your contact information, reiterate your asks, and thank them for their time, frankly, because then sometimes staff will start to close their notebook and they'll start to, all the body language is there. And if that happens, take the cue, and that's perfectly fine, but then that follow-up becomes that much more important because they'll say, oh, that's right, that was between these 6 meetings and that, the other 10 that I had that day. So make sure that you do the follow-up, but respect their time. Yeah.
Hold on, Krista, can you grab a mic?
I just have an add-on to that, because one of the things that I do, because obviously I drone on and I lose their attention all the time, so I start asking them questions. Do you have any family members who have had colon polyps or that have had colonoscopies? I start asking them questions, they have to engage back. So anything like that.
Yeah, and that's a great
grab their attention.
And that's a great way to begin a meeting, frankly. Do you have any connection to colorectal cancer? And then that kind of sets the table for you. This staffer has never heard of it before in their life, or yes, my father died of, colorectal cancer, that whole range. So that's a great way to start a meeting too.
Hello?
Hey, yeah.
So this is kind of a big question, but sometimes I find in the survivor community, we are a lot more comfortable with the thought of raising awareness, and then advocacy is kind of big and vague. So maybe for people tuning in at home or here where advocacy might be out of a comfort zone and it's a first step into it, what is your perspective on how is advocacy awareness? So somebody's geared more toward, I want to raise awareness. Based on your experience, how do those two blend, and what is the huge importance of what we're doing?
Absolutely. So when I talked about the formula of describe the problem, describe your experience with the problem, and then the solution of the problem, really raising awareness is describing that problem. A lot of people people who don't have experience with colorectal cancer have no idea. They don't have any idea what you're going through. They don't have any idea the regulatory barriers or the fight with your insurance or the Medicare denied your claim or whatever the case may be, because they just don't have a basic understanding. So in my view, raising awareness is step one of advocacy, explaining what this issue is and why you should care about it. So don't think that because you aren't comfortable yet actually getting to the point where you say, and will you do this, that what you're doing doesn't matter, because it does. You're laying groundwork, and either it will be you or it'll be someone else who will come in after you. But you sometimes you have to do it in bite-sized pieces and say, okay, I just want you to know that this problem exists, and let me just tell you a little bit about it. Chew on that for a while. And then next time that makes the ground more fertile for someone who might actually come in and make an ask.
Good morning. When there are several of us in the meeting with the congressperson or the staff, what's the best way to divvy up the responsibility? We all want to say the same thing, obviously.
Right.
So maybe even 4 or 5 people, like we're in Virginia, Northern Virginia, several of us. So what's your suggestion on that?
If you're all from different districts, make sure that the person who lives in that district, if you have one, is the one who's the mouthpiece. In my experience, it's the most effective for one person to be the primary presenter, and then others can chime in with comments or questions, but it can get really unwieldy pretty quickly if you break it up too much, because it makes the narrative very difficult to follow. So you can do, okay, I'll be the lead on this meeting, you can be the lead on the next meeting. Everyone should have an opportunity to tell their story, but make sure that the staff knows I'm here and I'm speaking on behalf of this group. They're happy to answer any questions. But in my experience, if there's one kind of spokesperson, and then if the staffer has questions, there might be someone who's better equipped to answer the question, and so get them involved that way. Yeah.
And just to add on to that, we will be practicing in your groups this afternoon with your state groups. So I think sometimes that depends on your actual group of people that you're with. Some groups prefer to break it up based on the ask. So I'm really comfortable with NIH. I'll talk about the NIH. You're really comfortable with the Medicare loophole bill, so you'll talk about that. Some groups are more comfortable that way. So we'll work out the kinks this afternoon. But I think it's, to echo what you said, it's very important just to have a plan in place.
Absolutely.
Got a question.
Yes.
So when we get in we have the meetings, everything's going, peachy. Then we get to the ask, and there's a lot of gridlock up here. How do we answer the pay-go question, especially in the House side? How are you going to pay for it? We know it's $2 million a year over 10 years or whatever the number is. How are you going to pay for it? How do we handle that question? Because that's not something we should have to tell them.
Yeah.
Because if they can't handle the little cut, how are they going to handle the big stuff later? Is the way I kind of feel about it.
They don't, is how they do it, but
yes. I mean, it's a political thing, so how do we get past that?
That is a great tool that staff use to kind of brush aside what you're doing. And not that it's not a legitimate concern, it is. There's a limited number of dollars. But it goes back to, you are not a congressional budget expert. That's not your role. What you are an expert at is the impact of this on you, your family, your loved ones. And so you may get that question, and you can acknowledge that, yes, I understand, it's a zero-sum game, money doesn't grow on trees here, but we feel like this is a priority that needs to be considered along with all the other things that the federal budget considers. This priority is worthy of your consideration, and we'd be happy to talk more about it. A lot of staff will try to do that, not a lot, staff will try to do that sometime and say, well, what's your pay for? How are you going to pay for this? And you as advocates can't look in the grand scheme of the federal budget and say, you know what, I think probably this would be a good pay for. That's not your role, and don't get caught up in that. The way that you can talk about it is, we feel like this is a really important priority that needs to be considered in the context of, whether it's the NIH budget or the CDC budget, and we recognize the constraints that you're under, so we really appreciate the consideration.
Sure. Can you come up to the mic?
So this is more just like a logistical type of thing, and a reminder that Wednesday when we are on the Hill, it is Strong Arm Selfie Day. So the last couple of years, in my experience, most of the staffers really do enjoy posing for pictures because they use that on their websites.
It's all those millennials, they love it.
They truly do. Not only is it good for us, but it's good for them.
Yes.
So don't forget to ask when you're in there if they mind posing it. That brings me to the question. We had a situation I never came up against last year. One of the staffers said she's not allowed to do pictures. So is that truly a rule? And is it good for us, obviously, to ask before you start snapping away in the office?
Congress is essentially 535 corporations. It's 100 senators. It's 435 members. And each office literally has their own policies. Some offices, that is a policy. They don't want their staff to do it for whatever reason. So if they say that, they're not trying to avoid doing it. It probably really is maybe they had a bad experience, maybe the member had something, but each office is responsible for setting those policies, so I would take their word for it. And yes, ask before you start taking photos.
Any other questions? Yeah. So we're going to give you guys some exercise today. We've got panels all day, and this is how you can ask questions.
It will be nothing like the exercise you get when you go to the Hill, though. So.
True. It's good practice.
To comment on asking about, the funding, I always remind, and I'm pretty comfortable with Mike because he's a cardiac surgeon, and so I know him locally, and I can kind of just go for the jugular with him, and he expects it. But I always remind him that, this is becoming an epidemic, and you can either pay and invest a little bit now, or you're going to be looking for a lot more funding later. So we can start now and invest a little.
Yeah.
What's the saying? You got to spend a nickel to make a dime, or whatever that is. Well, you got to invest a little bit for right now.
And that's a great point, talking about the preventive nature of what you're talking about versus the cost of, because even the most ardent budget hawk will recognize it costs 10 times more to treat a sick person than it does to prevent the sickness in the first place. And so that the return on investment is obviously a lot better.
All right, so this has come up the last 2 years, and I've done exactly what she just suggested.
Mm-hmm.
And the comeback from the staffer and from the congressmen themselves are, can you give me a hard number? What's the number? Do you have a study? Do you have something that supports the data that you're trying to, I believe it. I believe that there's a back-end cost that's bigger than what the front end would be. But in order for me to defend myself among my caucus members or among my people back home, I got to be able to support that. We don't have that number. And that would be something that would be helpful. But we don't have it. Yeah.
Understood. And I think, and when you have the data, it is very helpful. If there are hard numbers that you can cite, sometimes it's common sense, frankly. I mean, you can cite other statistics that might not be specific to colorectal cancer. There's probably statistics about cancer generally that you could cite. But the other thing you have to realize is not every member is going to be convinced. There are some members, especially now, who no matter what it is, they don't care what it is. They're not spending another dime. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they're going to, it doesn't matter. So it's not your failure if they don't agree. She's back.
She is back, but I'm cutting you off first because I'm going to build on what David just said. So I think it's really important just for everyone in the room to know these are awesome questions. They're great questions. The next panel is going to drill down into each of these policy issues that you're going to be talking about. So the numbers are going to start coming up, and you will be informed by the end of the day, but these are really great things to start thinking about. And as you're listening to the experts in the next panel, kind of put yourself in that place. So what questions do I need to ask these experts so that I'm better informed when I'm in those meetings? But these are really great questions, and they're real world situations that you will be dealing with on the Hill. And just remember also, I just want to give everyone kind of a buffer. If you can't answer a question, don't make anything up. Just say, I don't know the answer, but I'm definitely going to get back to you. And the power of that is it forces you to get back to them and build that relationship. So just kind of as a caveat.
And it gives you credibility because you admitted that you didn't know.
And we have a wonderful part-time staff person who lives here, who's on the Hill all the time, our Margaret Carvin, and she is your secret weapon. So on all of the leave behind materials that are in your folder, on the bottom of your lanyard, it says question Margaret Carvin. So if something comes up, that's what Margaret does. Margaret finds and answers these tough questions for us. That's why we have her, and she does a great job. So if anything, even if it seems like it might be a simple question and you don't know the answer, just ask Margaret and we'll get back to that office, but we just need you guys to let us know. But please don't be intimidated.
I don't know is a perfectly reasonable response. I don't know, but I'll get back to you.
And I know this is all scary to everybody because believe me, I'm not a on the Hill advocate, as you can tell. I mean, I wear a blue tutu, but when you're just talking to normal people. You got to remember that, and they have family, and so basically what they're saying is all true. Just relax, go in there, tell your story, make your ask. If you don't know, say you don't know. But to go back to what David was saying, I'm not good at remembering numbers and all that and the statistics. Again, that's not my thing. But I just go in, and that's where your colander, and I'm not trying to plug that, but that's where that comes in handy. We don't have those numbers. But take a look at this. If there's 12 people in here right now, there's a whole other atmosphere out there, a whole other community, and this is on the rise. It's an epidemic, and Medicare sets the stage for that, all the way down to each one of you. How you're getting treatment and how you're getting screened, and your kids will be screened. So and that sets the standard. So we don't need an exact number. One person is worth the investment. You don't need the number. And I see what you're saying, and so don't get caught up in that we have to have an exact number. Just appeal to them use the colander. Here you go. And tell your story. That's your number.
Thanks, Krista.
Can you speak more about...
Sorry, Candace.
I've been doing this all day. I know, right? Can you speak more about when you're talking to the staffers about holding your emotions in? Because I've gone to Congress on a couple of occasions with another group, and we've had a couple of people that totally destroyed the meeting because they were still angry about situations that happened. And so can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a difference between informed advocates and desperate patients, frankly, and that's what we're looking for. Is are you an informed advocate, or are you going to be seen as a desperate patient? Because if you walk in there and you're angry and no one's going to help me, and then you automatically get put into the angry patient category, and your impact is diminished greatly. What you are and what you need to present yourself as are informed advocates. I know that this matters to my family. I know that Congress has the ability to make a difference, and I'm here to explain to you why that matters. I'm here to give you a plea. It's fine to be personal. I encourage you, be personal. Talk about your experience that helped you reach this conclusion that it's really important for Congress to make this change. But if you go in and have a chip on your shoulder and are picking a fight, or you make a staff member feel like they have to choose a side in a fight, they don't want to do that. They don't have, there's not any motivation for them to do that. They just want to stay away. So have a complaining session, airing of grievances beforehand, if that's what it takes, because I understand that it can be really frustrating. And I understand you walk out of those meetings and you think, really? I just told my story and these people are asking me for, budget numbers. But remember, you're here as advocates, you're here as informed advocates, you're not here as desperate patients, and make sure that you're the former, not the latter.
Awesome. Thank you, Chelsey. Do we have any other just questions about sharing your story or anything along those lines? Okay. Well, thank you so much, Chelsey.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so this never happens, but we are